Hello everyone, welcome back to class. From the previous lessons, we learned that the body has three regulatory mechanisms that work together to maintain homeostasis. They are neural regulation, humoral regulation, and autoregulation. How do they cooperate? To find answers, physiologists changed their approach, setting aside physical, chemical, and biological phenomena, and began to study the body from the perspective of control theory. They found that from molecular and cellular levels to system and whole body functions, there exist various types of control systems. The simplest control system contains at least two parts. Part A, the controller, and Part B, the controlled unit. Using this model, let's decode the control systems inside our bodies. The first type is a non-automatic control system. In this system, signals from the controller affect the controlled unit, but the controlled unit cannot send information back. This is a one-way open-loop control. It lacks automatic regulation and is relatively rare in physiological regulation. The second type is an automatic control system, also called a feedback control system. In such systems, the controller issues commands to control the activity of the controlled unit, and the controller's activity is influenced by information returned from the controlled unit. This information from the controlled unit that influences the controller is called feedback. Depending on how feedback affects the control signals, feedback is classified as negative or positive. Feedback that drives the controlled unit's activity to change in the opposite direction is called negative feedback. Negative feedback is very common in the human body and plays a key role in maintaining physiological homeostasis. The arterial baroreceptor reflex is an excellent example. When arterial blood pressure rises, the reflex can inhibit cardiac and vascular activity, causing decreased heart activity and vasodilation, which lowers blood pressure. Conversely, when arterial pressure falls, the reflex can enhance cardiac and vascular activity, raising blood pressure and thus maintaining relative stability. Have you noticed that negative feedback control has a set point? This makes the controlled unit's activity fluctuate only around that set operating point. In fact, the set point can be seen as the mean of the normal range for physiological variables. For blood pressure, it is typically around 120/80 mmHg. The same applies to body temperature. When body temperature deviates from its set point of 37 degrees Celsius, sensors detect the temperature difference and send the information to the controller for processing, which then adjusts the controlled unit's activity to regulate temperature, including skin vasomotion and changes in sweat gland activity. A negative feedback control system is a closed loop, and feedback can occur repeatedly in the loop. Only after multiple exchanges of information can deviations be gradually reduced, approaching the normal mean and allowing precise regulation. Positive feedback, on the other hand, is the opposite. Feedback promotes and enhances the activity of the controller, ultimately causing the controlled unit to change in the same direction as its initial activity. The significance of positive feedback is to create a snowball effect, or to drive a physiological process rapidly to a peak and maximize its effect. For example, during urination. Once urination starts and urine enters the posterior urethra, it stimulates receptors there, which send feedback that further enhances the micturition center, strengthening the reflex until the bladder is emptied. Positive feedback is much less common than negative feedback, and usually acts locally and briefly. Positive feedback does not correct deviations, and generally does not maintain homeostasis. However, some positive feedback has indirect roles in maintaining stability. For example, blood coagulation is a typical positive feedback process. During clotting, coagulation factors are activated sequentially, producing a cascade, which amplifies and accelerates the effect. Clearly, coagulation helps prevent further blood loss. So from the whole organism perspective, clotting plays an important role in maintaining circulating blood volume. There is another special form in automatic control systems, feed-forward. The controller is influenced by corrective information before feedback arrives, thus correcting potential deviations in its commands in time. For example, in a cold environment, when body temperature drops to a certain level, it stimulates the thermoregulatory center, increasing metabolic activity and heat production, while skin blood vessels constrict, reducing heat loss from the surface, so body temperature rises again. This is negative feedback. But in fact, a healthy person's body temperature is very stable. Because in addition to feedback control, feed-forward control also participates. People can perceive cues of cold through vision and hearing, which are transmitted to the brain via sensory organs. And the brain immediately issues commands to increase heat production and reduce heat loss. These actions do not require the cold stimulus to lower temperature first, but occur before body temperature actually falls. For instance, seeing ads for cold drinks in summer makes you feel cooler. Hearing cicadas makes you feel hot. In winter, seeing hot pot evokes a sense of warmth. Additionally, conditioned reflexes are a form of feed-forward control. For example, imagining plums relieves thirst. Athletes often show changes in circulation and respiration before they start competing, which are conditioned reflexes and thus feed-forward control. Physiological activity is complex, often requiring all three regulatory mechanisms via multiple pathways to maintain normal vital functions. This is what makes physiology so fascinating.